So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. While we wait for all the people to join as well, I will make a quick introduction to the webinar series and this webinar. So this initiative started as an idea to really create a space where different coffee players could start talking and discussing about perspective and challenges and needs of digitalizing the coffee value chain. So this specific webinar, which is the second of the series, will answer the question, can digitalization help the coffee sector be more efficient? And in order to do that, we have our amazing speaker with us today, Ivania Rivera from Aldea Global, Isabel van Bemmelen from Progreso Foundation, Richard Bliault from Algrano and Yorick Bruins from Wakuli. And then you have me, I'm Elisa Criscione from Expressing Origin, and I will be your moderator for today. So a few housekeeping information before we start. This session will be recorded and it will be basically starting with a panel session among the different panelists discussing and answering the questions, followed by a Q&A session of about 10 to 15 minutes towards the end. To ask questions, please use the Q&A tab. You can do that anytime you feel like you want to ask a question. We'll keep monitoring and recording all the questions coming in. And as mentioned, we'll make sure we can answer as many questions as possible towards the end of the session. Then this is more like a recommendation. On the right top end side of your screen, you can see a button that says gallery mode. We won't be using slides during this webinar, so if you click on that, you'll be able to see all the speakers at the same time, and that makes it a bit more interactive and engaging. So if you want, please do that. And finally, introduce yourself in the chat, share with us your name, where you're calling or joining from, which city or country, and if you want the company that you're working for. Finally, but also very important, if you want to promote the webinar or the initiative, feel free to use the hashtag #DigitalCoffeeFuture. A huge thank you to our partners, IDH, Barista Magazine, and the Coffee Podcast, and also to our sponsors, eCrop Origin, Cropster, and Sustainable Harvest, who decided to jump on board with us and start supporting this initiative. So now I will stop sharing my screen. You should be able to see all the panelists now, and we'll just dive in. So for the people that didn't join the first webinar and were with us, a couple of weeks ago, we started talking about coffee digitalization, and that was really a chance to somehow frame the discussion, try to understand, okay, what's the meaning behind digitalization? So now we want to go a bit deeper and really understand what is the efficiency behind digitalization. And we want to do that by bringing the perspective of different organizations and companies that are using digital tools in their own businesses. And we are trying to do that from the very first mile until the very last mile of the chain. So I guess in that case, we'll start with Ivania, asking her, you know, at Aldea Global, you've been working paperless for the past years now. So can you tell us a bit more how that works, and in a way, how you think this process is helping your farmers?
Thank you, Elisa. And yes, we have been working on digitalization over the past maybe 10 years. And it's a process that really takes a lot of time, takes a lot of efforts from the, especially from the team, because you have to switch all your processes from paper to a system. It's not something that you can only buy a software and that you are using it and that's how you get your company digitalized. It's a process where everybody participates. And our experience, the way we started was first because we wanted to have all the information online, and this will allow us to take better decisions in terms of how many coffee do we have, how we are doing with our sales, with our logistics, and how can we monitor, for example, our membership. What can we do to identify their needs? What can we do to improve the services that we are providing for them? And that was the reason how we started. And it takes a long time, and it takes also a lot of resources but the result, it's really good for us. The way we have been using all the different tools that we have developed is, number one, controlling the membership and improving the different systems that we have, improving the processes, the internal processes, improving the internal controls that we do for the company, and also allow us like to take or have more decisions available and take better decisions. For us has been a tool that allowed us to control better in terms of quality, in terms of information, in terms of contracts, in terms of sales, in terms of logistics. It is a guide that help us to do better in the business. So that's the reason I think it allowed the producers to improve also the different services that they are receiving from the association. We are a farmers association, and we are in Nicaragua. We were almost the same as a cooperative. So we have to control all the different steps that takes for gathering the coffee, receiving the coffee, providing microfinance services to the producers, identifying their needs in the farm, doing like business plans. Every single farm is a business plan. So you have to control everything in that, and it's not easy to do it in paper. That's the reason you have to do in a software, on an online system. The other step that we also do is the business, and is in this one we consider how much coffee are we receiving every day, what's the price that we have paid for this coffee, how many coffees been delivered to the dry mill, and where is this coffee? For example, if we want to know if this coffee arrived today, when is it gonna be ready to be sent to the warehouse? For how long it's gonna stay at the warehouse? When is it gonna be ready for shipment, for example? Then we also have the sales, and on the sales side, it's all regarding to the different conditions of the contracts, who my customer is, where this coffee is going to, when do we send samples to, and then the booking, all the different documents that it requires. Actually, we can also do like a checklist on every different farm, how they are applying all the different criteria on certifications. Are they complying with all the requirements for that or not? How can we support them to comply? So if we don't identify, if we don't have the information on real time, it's not possible to take decisions, or at least good decisions for it. Then the way it also helps the producers is if we have the information, we can identify what are their needs, what they really need from us, what do they expect from us, or how we can identify some gaps and prepare some specific services for those gaps. So it's been like a good experience in a long-term experience in this.
Thank you, Ivania. That was very helpful. So basically, we see how, in a way, you can integrate digital innovation from the field, working with the farmers. And as Aldea Global has been doing, is really somehow supporting farmers all the way up from like the farm management, but also to delivering inputs, making sure deliveries are on time, are connected with the inventory, and also in a way support farmers with additional services, such as, for example, loans and all that is connected with them. Also, we know that this digital innovation can somehow connect more than one player in the system. And this has been a bit the case of trading platforms that have been more active in the past years in the coffee sector. So on that side, we have Beko that has been launched a couple of years ago. and somehow connect sellers with buyers. It will be interesting, Isabel, to know a bit more on how it works and how you integrated technology there.
Thank you. Well, I think it's important to explain a bit also how Progreso works, because Beko is a platform which is owned by Progreso. As Progreso, it's a Dutch foundation based in Amsterdam. We have been working with producer organizations for the last 20 years. So actually already with Aldea Global, we worked, I think, maybe 15 years ago, started with them in their early stages, and where we support producer organizations in becoming more sustainable businesses. So where we work in various countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, guiding organizations with an integral approach, but always looking on on how to improve various aspects, but with a high focus on access to markets and access to finance. In my former career as a social lender, for me it became very clear that only finance was not enough, because even if you have an approved credit line, you'll still need an export contract to be able to get a disbursement on that credit line. So you have to prove that there's somebody who's willing to purchase your coffee. Otherwise, you cannot have that credit line. The other way around also works if you have available credit as a producer organization during your harvest. It makes it more likely that you can purchase coffee from your members as an organization and deliver your contract online for the required quality, or on time, sorry, for the required quality. And that's actually the idea why where Beko came from, to facilitate the access on markets. As Beko, it's in line with the core business of Progreso, and with the platform we can facilitate this access to markets for many more organizations than just the Progreso partners, as we used to do. It's an open platform, it's free of charge, you can make a profile, but where we do a customer due diligence before accepting any party, as we want to provide an environment of trusted organizations. So Beko, it's a blockchain-based platform, and as you mentioned, it's live since end of 2018. On Beko, how it works, a producer organization can make an offer for the coffees, they can have a chat, they can negotiate on the sales, and they can sign contracts online. Further on, if both the buyer and the seller agree, you can visualize your contract on an external page, and then providing information about the price, the volume, quality, and if certification was involved. You can do that, so you can provide the full traceability, but you can decide for yourself if you want this information public. It's not a need. Besides that, what we're currently working on is a digital connection with credit. Then the contracts that have been closed on Beko can be used to request for a loan. And the loans, they can be provided by Progreso on a small scale from Progreso funds for the starting organizations who don't have access to finance yet, but also from a social lender for bigger loans in a later stage. This is a system we have been working already for many years, but with digitalization and having social lenders connected to Beko, it becomes more efficient to analyze a loan request and to be able to provide finance. In that sense, a track record can be generated by the platform and can be used to lower the risk for social lenders. As we're developing Beko in steps, so we launched it first place to facilitate access to markets, but with the intention to connect the social lenders to the platform, to have the essential combination of access to markets with access to finance. Besides having social lenders connected, we're also in discussion with IDH FarmFit to have a first loss guarantee connected to the platform as a service, which even makes a digital connection of loans related to Beko more attractive.
Thank you, Isabel. So it's interesting to see, when starting from like the very first, like on the ground in the field, and then how somehow digital innovation can integrate more players. And in this case, how Beko interacts with different social lenders also, as well as sellers and buyers. And in a way, it's a system that collecting data and information can somehow mitigate risk for all the different players involved. So it will be interesting to see, Richard, what has been your approach at Algrano in connection to digitalization? What has been the value there for you?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I mean, I suppose so. We operate, I guess, a digital marketplace for coffee to connect growers and roasters with each other. And I think the first concept came from the idea that with the right service provision, because any contract still needs the service provision to be able to get from wherever it is in origin to destination, that there is no need for a grower not to be able to contract directly with a roaster. And I think that's where we see digitalization playing a role, which is to allow a producer to stand on the same level as a roaster and to have an equal conversation. And a lot of the barriers to that taking place have often been non-essential elements in terms of their main work. So knowing whether or not they have a contracting relationship with a warehouse in Germany, which, I mean, there are 10, 20, 30, depending on which port you want to go to, and whether or not that's really the right one and whether they've got the right freight rate. Those are all service provision things, and they're pretty easily done through a digital platform like ours and priced out transparently and arranged for transparently. And then that allows both a producer and a roaster to have the essential conversation, which is really about what they do best, which is probably producing coffee, and for a roaster trying to find what they want to roast rather than the rest of it, which is, I mean, vital, but kind of secondary in terms of their relationship to a producer. And I think that can make it a lot more efficient, and it opens up conversations and marketplaces to different growers where they want to be active in doing it. I mean, it doesn't mean they have to, but it then gives them the opportunity to take a step in that direction. I always find it quite funny that an awful lot of roasters spend a lot of time saying it's essential to go to origin, and yet you never hear a conversation about how essential it is for producers to go to destination. But actually, that's what it should be. It should be an equal exchange, and I think digitalization is a very positive means of achieving that. We do it on a commercial basis. We think there's a commercial value to enabling each party to stand on a level playing field and talk to each other.
That's great. Thanks so much. So yeah, I guess we have seen two different sides of connecting buyers with sellers until now. And we are moving towards the end of the value chain, so to say. And I guess we connect with now Wakuli and what Yorick has been doing. Also from like the first webinar, for those of you that were connected, Sarah Morocchi was talking about how we are moving towards this low touch economy, where somehow e-commerce is also playing a huge part also for the coffee industry. So Yorick, could you a bit like share with us why you decided to start an e-commerce business directly, and what's the value there for you behind digitalization?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Elisa. Yeah, we started last year, January, here in the Netherlands. And I tried to write down today what we actually are doing in one sentence. And it's fairly difficult because I still am not sure myself. But found that we are sort of a direct trade, direct to consumer, specialty coffee, subscription, e-commerce, right? So trying to break it down, we work together with farmer communities around the world to import high quality coffee, to add value in different ways, not only in terms of a higher price for coffee, but also long-term commitments, where social lenders can come in as well. And reinvesting together jointly in projects that we deem necessary for our joint future. And on the other hand, here in the Netherlands, we roast as a service, and we supply Dutch households right now, and hopefully later European households, with the same high quality directly traded coffee that's traceable and transparent through their mailbox on a weekly to monthly basis. So that's more or less what covers what we do. And why we decided to do what we do is because we saw an inefficiency, or at least a gap, between the current offering in traceable and transparent high quality coffees that are often found in city centers, could be elitist sometimes, and it's a great offering for people like me and probably like you, Elisa, living in Milan, these busy traffic areas, or maybe we don't want to spend that much money on their coffee, and where we saw that if we can connect growers and consumers with only the necessary middlemen or the necessary people facilitating, like Beko, like Algrano, we can offer a coffee that is price competitive with the top 10 mid-shelf supermarket, and we get more people to drink better coffee, better quality, better traded. Really trying to accelerate the coffee transition here in the Netherlands, but also trying to create a level playing field, as mentioned before, where it's not anymore just us asking for information to farmers or just telling a farmer story, but really being able to use our digital layer, because at the end, that's what we are, to create interaction between farmers and consumers. And that's something that is fairly difficult because of many reasons, but it is at the end the whole chain that you can put together with help from others to make sure that on the platform we built, by Wakuli, consumers and producers can interact. And there is this, where we normally see this information asymmetry between, like, I mean, asking any random producer I worked with in the past, like, who drank your coffee last year? It's very difficult to find out who drank their coffee. And now we can actually point to the households. And yeah, we even have more data, of course, but we'll get back to that later. But that's more or less what we do.
Thank you, Yorick. Okay, so that's great. I guess we ended our journey in the value chain for the moment. And just to just for the attendees, for the audience, if you can please use the Q&A tab to ask questions. Otherwise, if you use the chat, we'll probably won't be able to monitor all the questions coming in. So this is, sorry, this is more like an internal request. And then before we move on, we wanted to ask a bit of interaction from you, all the attendees connected, to answer the first poll. Let's activate that. Just a few seconds. Perfect. So now we are asking you, where do you see the value behind digitalization? And feel free to choose what you see best as a fit. A few more seconds. Answers are coming in. That's great. So we can end the poll. So, well, this is not something I was expecting, to be honest. It's nice. So we do feel like value redistribution is probably the value that you see the most. And then we still have increased market penetration, which is also quite interesting. I'm sure we'll get back to you later on this. So thank you so much for answering. And now I'll go back to my amazing speakers here. So somehow we've seen through all these presentations in a way that data is definitely has a big role when we talk about digitalization, which of course is somehow obvious, but it's collecting data and managing data that really brings this efficiency that we're all talking about when including digital innovations. So going a bit back and starting again from the very first mile of the chain, talking to Ivania in this case, could you share with us how you do maintain this quality of data when you collect them from your farmers, and in a way, which is the kind of information you share back with them?
Well, the information that we share with the producers is most related to the farmer, with the management that they are doing. For example, if one loan advisor, because we provide finance to the farms, if they identify, for example, that they don't need the amount of money that they are asking for because they will have, for example, some other incomes in the future, and they can explain easily the reason why one loan is approved on a less amount than what they ask. They can also provide like some recommendations regarding the inputs they are buying, the price of the inputs they are buying, and for example, if there is a better alternative for the income, for the inputs that they are using already, and the other information that they receive is how they are doing in the farm. what kind of improvements do they need to do in terms of the management, in terms of the water treatment, in terms of the some controls that they need to do, or for example, some information that they need to register for the farming operations. They also receive, they have, for example, we just developed a new application where the producer can download the application, receive a password and a username, and they can check how they are doing on their loans. For example, when is my next payment as a producer? Because most of us, if we have a loan, we already have access to a bank account, a bank page, and we can see our credit statement. But most of the producers sometimes even forget. So that's the reason we developed a new application for that, so they can log in and check their credit and loans status. If they can also request a loan from this application. And they monitor, for example, if I am a producer and I want to know, or I don't remember how many coffee I committed to the organization this year, so I can just log into the app and see how many coffee did I promise to bring, and how much coffee did I already brought to the organization, and how much is spending. The other information is they can, for example, fill a loan application from there and set what their input requirement will be for the next month. So this is some of the information that we get back to them. The other one is regarding, your other question is regarding the quality of the information. And it's true because, we have over 12,000 members, and it's a lot of producers in a small country, Nicaragua. So the quality of the information that we are receiving is important. The way we do it is, first of all, we use a lot of catalogs. We don't want every single person writing like different name. Like if you are going to buy, for example, a fertilizer, and they are putting the name of that fertilizer, one people may spell it in one way, the other people will spell it in another way. So that's the reason we better use catalogs. The other fact is every single person in the organization uses a software. For example, if one producer is coming for the first time to join the association, so they will get a single ID for their whole life. Even if they decide to quit from the organization this year and reactivate themselves next year, they will always have the same ID. And this is connected also with their national ID. So they can come to the association, just present their national ID, and we scan. And by this number, we see all the information that is already at the software. So the quality depends on how the software has been developed, of course.
Thank you so much. So in this case, we see how somehow there is a strong connection between what was needed from Aldea Global and then what has been developed for the different farmers involved. And they have around 4,000 members, if I'm not mistaken. In that case, we can somehow see how also the other platforms have been built for specific needs. And when looking at Beko, it would be interesting, Isabel, to better understand what's the value there that sellers perceive, again, when using the platform.
Yes, I think by connecting to Beko, organizations can get better access to markets. They can have more connections with buyers. They can set a price and negotiate on their coffees. Digital connections of new but also existing buyers provides a track record that can attract more potential buyers. Besides that, we can offer Progreso services like support on writing credit applications, cash flow projections, financial literacy trainings, and connect them with social lenders. As explained, if you're not eligible for a loan from a social lender yet because you're starting up your business, we could provide small loans for the contracts that have been closed on Beko from the Progreso Fund. In a later stage then, we can connect with social lenders, the producer groups for social lenders for the bigger ticket sizes. And this is how we have been closely working together, for example, with Rabobank for the last 20 years. Besides having access to more potential buyers, services related, we can also connect potential users or users of the platform with other services, for example, on logistics. With other service providers like Vollers, we combine that and request for other services which are needed. Because we notice that producer organizations, they often need some support to get online connection to potential buyers. It's not you put your coffees online and it gets sold automatically. You have to update it, you have to reply on a request for a sample, you have to make sure that your offers are up to date, have a good title, and also related to the pricing. Sometimes you'll need some support. On the other hand, we also notice that some buyers, they will request for some support, for example, on making a good export contract or on the logistics. So that's why we've added the services to the platform. Next to that, we're developing an app related to Beko, which can make a registration of the farmers related to their organization. With this app, you can have a full coffee traceability from the farmer up to the buyer, but also input finance can be related to this. And the importance of input finance, Ivania just mentioned it, but I think also in the first panel, it has been mentioned by Ashley, that it's very important. So because we know that if you would like to make on-farm investments, it's very complicated to have access to a loan. But we know that it's needed if you want to make investments for quality and improving productivity. But as Ivania also mentioned, like having that data, they can give more insight where the coffee is coming from, but also if the farmers who got access to a loan and did it really support on improving the productivity and the quality. I think this leads to better understanding, easier impact measurements, and it also refers to a lower risk profile. So that type of data in combination, Beko with the app, does not only provide a track record for the organizations, but also for the individual farmer. And there's also where we can connect the Progreso services to the support of setting up an internal fund, because it's not, hey, you can take 10,000 euros or dollars and good luck with it. You have to know how to have that internally managed. And we can provide the trainings and the guidance as Progreso of how to set up such a fund, but also on the data collection in the field. Because we believe when a producer organization has the farmer data connected, they can show how well they are managing such a fund. It also becomes more likely that they can receive a loan to expand this. And I think we can all take Aldea experience here as a great example.
Thank you, Isabel. So here I see this connection between the role of data that has been played both for Aldea Global, but also in the case of Beko, and somehow the fact that collecting this information and managing in a specific way allows the different players and in this case users that are connected to access to specific services that in this case are somehow more efficient compared to what was happening previously. So if we connect the idea of services to Algrano, Richard, how do you think is somehow in this case data and services connected for you?
Yeah, I think it's do some things very similarly to Beko and some things very, very differently. I mean, so for us, I think, and we're building it at the moment, so it's kind of still in our future, although we do it in the background. Where we see it playing a big role is what we talked about, kind of leveling the playing field between roasters and growers, which is often the traditional model of buying or selling coffee is done very much through relationships and through friendships and long histories with different people, which is great. It gets you very good service sometimes, but it also makes it incredibly challenging for a group, even which has existed for a long time, to break into a new market or to bring on new clients, because all their performance is anecdotal. It's my friend that you liked said these people are good people, which was probably good enough 10 years ago, but it certainly isn't good enough now when a lot of roasters, both big and small, work on a just-in-time basis when they need coffee within a week so that they can get it out in time. Yorick can tell me about this at the moment. And understanding when things flow on time, whether they'll flow on time, it's very important, and it allows both roasters and producers to understand where they stand in a performance basis and understand where they want to improve. I mean, I used to work a lot with Ethiopian coffee, and it's always the anecdotal kind of evidence that you have to book an Ethiopian shipment a month early if you want it to ship on time, because everybody from Ethiopia will ship a month late. But is that really true? I'm not really sure. It's kind of anecdotal. Nobody really knows. And I had lots of shipment partners who used to ship on time, in which case, why can't you select out those people that will work well and pay for it? Because you don't need to keep it in a warehouse for a month when it arrives on time, according to the original contract. It's all those kind of things. They take that little bit of inefficiency out of the chain, and they let a producer see and a roaster see where there's a bit more, I don't know, value to be redistributed in it, which is perhaps coming from an inefficiency in terms of how people appreciate what service they get. And I think the same is true of maybe quality approvals as well. We look at it, I mean, some roasters are extremely good at calibrating with their suppliers. They're extremely good about making sure that the first sample they get through the door is what they want to approve. And some roasters, you've got to send 4 samples to get a single approval. And every sample is $50, $60 worth of DHL fees, another 5 days worth of waiting around. That's probably another 5 days worth of financing you're paying for. I mean, it goes both ways. It's not a one-way track. It's not only producers can improve. There's also stuff where roasters can be aware that, okay, maybe our calibration efforts aren't as good as they could be, or maybe we could have another conversation with these 3 producers because we see that we're not on the normal track that we have with them. So that's how we look at it. I mean, we want to build that. We have a pool of data. And the way we work is we don't really work as a trader, we work as a service provider. We take no positions. So being somewhat neutral, we also have no fear about, saying when someone is a good or a bad actor in that sense, because it's only through being more or less transparent, which is what we do with the pricing, that you get the opportunity to understand where someone stands. I mean, which is where the value is. And I think it's where it's interesting because it allows and then opens up the market. I mean, we have Ivania and a really wonderful old kind of cooperative group, but I know of groups in Peru or in Guatemala that are trying to form now or formed a year or 2 years ago, and they have no idea what is the expected service standard. Zero, because there's no pool of information to pull on, because it's just not really existed. I mean, they can, again, get it anecdotally, but beyond that, it's how do I know what my benchmark is? And I think that's something that we want to bring out into the open, and which digitalization can do in a big way, and it also depersonalizes it. So I think bad performance or very good performance then isn't a kind of personal thing, but can be received more as just like, oh, okay, that's feedback. Last year we had a bad year for shipments. Oh, okay, it's not Richard calling me up on the phone saying like, why didn't you ship on time? Why are you doing rubbish this year? It's instead, oh, okay, we had an issue because we were getting more rejections than we used to, and that delayed shipments moving out, blocked the warehouse, and so we weren't loading trucks as efficiently as we should. And that's, it's a performance issue we want to show people we're addressing for the next season so that we keep our relationships going. I mean, yeah, that's where we see it playing a role, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's in a way, it's somehow the connection of having information and somehow have the opportunity to improve performances, which is not just directed at producers in this way, but it's also directed at roasters and somehow the different players that are involved that can improve with the services that they are providing. And Yorick, it's interesting to know a bit more about your perspective. What is like the value for you of collecting and managing data for a roaster e-commerce company?
I would say the value is enormous. I mean, without data, we would never be able to set up what we have set up, and the data supports our mission. First and foremost, because we have a huge advantage over classic retail in the sense that we have a direct connection with all our consumers. So we have direct feedback loops with all households drinking the coffee that are produced by our farmer friends around the world. And we're able to also act on it way quicker than classic retail. I mean, we don't have a shelf in the middle. We don't have to spend a lot of money on expensive surveys. We only need to go online and connect with the consumer and ask them what they thought about their coffee, or even look at how they behave within their own Wakuli environments, see what they choose, how they shift to bigger or smaller quantities of consumption, how they choose to a different flavor profile. And all that data we can use not only to steer our company in a certain direction, but also again to feed back to the producers we work with. I mean, we're not even 2 years old, and we've already switched a part of the processing at one a producer cooperative we work with, just to adjust it more to the flavor profile of consumers we're currently supplying to on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So that's really like our huge advantage, next to the fact that, of course, being a subscription company allows us to project very well our needs. And now Richard probably is going to laugh because I'm asking always for more last minute from his side. But generally, we know how much it costs to acquire a customer. We know how much we need to do in terms of efforts to keep them on board, not only in terms of quality, but also service. And then we can project even up to the end of 2021. And again, work together with farmers to say, okay, we're doing 100 bags or 150 bags this year. We're doing a container next year, and we're growing together into this value chain. And I think, therefore, without data, we will be the most manageable ship in the world, because we never get to see someone live, besides if we really go into the streets with our bags of coffee. And therefore, like, it's detrimental, and makes that we, I think, can also be of like the best service to our customer. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't make any sense. People have been ordering razor blades through their mailbox for the past 7 years in the Netherlands or Western Europe, but don't order freshly roasted coffee that they can't get in the supermarket through their mailbox on a bi-weekly basis, exactly how they want it. So yeah, I mean, we see a huge potential there for data. Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you, Yorick. So again, it's very interesting to see how all this collection and management of data can somehow support and improve performance at the end for all of you and all the different businesses you're currently working with and for at the end. So I guess now it's time for another break and for another pool. So we keep our attendees energized. Hopefully we can make this work. Amazing. So here we try to bring you to the next level and help us understand why this data can be beneficial according to you, of course. Let's wait a few more seconds. Okay, let's end the pool. So I think here there's no much difference between different options. We can see that anyhow, everything is somehow connected. So this is a bit of a call to action from different attendees listening to us, saying to you as panelists that all of this is helpful and very welcome. So this is very interesting. Thank you so much for everyone that responded. So I guess now we can somehow move towards the future for what is possible, and in a way try to understand how this digital innovation can be also integrated on a bigger level, and in a way can make the sector efficient in the years to come, or at least in the medium long-term perspective. So Ivania, I think we'll again start from you and somehow better understand, and of course, like if you can share your perspective on, do you think like something like you're doing at Aldea Global and the kind of system and platform that you're been working for could be somehow replicated for other cooperatives? Will this something doable, you think?
Well, when we started this process We were a small association. We were a small farmers association, and we were exporting, for example, like less than 50 containers of coffee. Our membership was of 1,000 members, the most. So we were really small when we started. So there is no reason to say that because we are a small farmers cooperative, it's not possible to reach that level. And we have received some proposals from cooperatives and also from some of our buyers asking for the system if we can replicate it. And we are open to do it. However, what we did was a systematization of all the internal processes that we are doing in the company. So our internal process may not be the same that a cooperative in Nicaragua or a cooperative in Uganda or in Colombia, Peru is doing. So the first thing that they have to focus on is on the commitment in the organization for doing this change. And there are a lot of softwares available. There are a lot of apps developed already. And some of them just have very single users. Some of them have been adapted to every single country. But the first thing you have to work is internally, is in the processes, is in the decisions, is in the way and controls that you have within the company. And we would like to share it, of course. We are more than open to provide, for example, if one cooperative in Africa, in Peru, in Colombia, ask us to do a presentation about how we work, we are open to do it. But we cannot provide, or we can provide the software to them, but how they are going to use it if the processes are not the same. The reason why we have not provided this service yet is because we don't have a team for doing the technical support. Because if I provide you this system, you also need someone to teach you how to use it, how to adapt it to the company that you are running, how to do the changes in terms of the different processes that you are doing. For example, Nicaragua, we work on, we receive the coffee in wet parchment. But I think Costa Rica, which is right next to the other border, they receive the coffee in cherries. And if we go back to Colombia, they receive the coffee in dry parchment. So you know how different the things are, only going from one country to another. And also in the same country, things are different. So that's the only reason why we have not do like duplication of this software with another institution. But of course, if you have a good team and with a commitment for doing this change, we can do it.
Thank you, Ivania. So I think it's interesting to see how here again, it's not just a matter of having a perfect system like the one that Aldea Global has, but it's also a matter of having a system that is customized and dedicated to your needs and your challenges. So I guess this is a bit the trick, try to balance between what's a good system and what's the customization that you need in order to adapt it to what is needed for you as a cooperative, or of course like a company or a business in this case. And in a way, we know that talking about innovation in a sector that has been working in a very traditional ways for many decades has been a bit of a barrier lately. And in a way, I think it would be interesting to know from Isabel, which is your perspective when we talk about coffee trading. Do you think in a way the future will allows online trading to grow and to become more like a normal thing, or how do you feel like people will be more confident of using online trading? How do you see the future on that side?
I think a system, it won't change, it won't replace relationship. I mean, coffee trading has been done based on a relationship for so many years. It won't replace those relationships, but it can facilitate in making new ones. A system could facilitate in making new ones. So besides the fact that you can show existing relationships to other parties, but you can also And this can also attract new connections as well. So for example, if you have been trading a lot, like Aldea Global, new buyers might get into it sooner because they believe you have experience. So it's more likely for them that you will comply with an export contract on the time. And well, actually everything that Richard mentioned about the timing and the full logistics. If you have experience, it's more likely that you can do that. The same counts for a loan. If you've had a working capital before, and if you can share that, okay, I've had this before, I have this track record, it's easier that you can get a new loan, whether it's from the same social lender or maybe another one, because they can see you have experience. And I think it's not only the case for sellers, but also for buyers. Because if I'm a seller and I'm not familiar with you as a buyer, but I can see you have a good track record online, it also becomes, you become a more reliable off-taker for me as well. Related to that, a social lender is also more willing to pre-finance your export contract if you have a good track record as a buyer. Because working with trade finance structure, where the buyer, they pay back when the coffee gets delivered, or at least the documents for the coffee gets delivered, it also shifts the risk from the producer organizations to the buyer. So if you're not familiar with a buyer, you're not really likely to get that contract pre-financed. So in that sense, I think the market, the financial track record that can be generated by the Beko platform, it confirms existing relationships and it makes it easier to establish new ones. I think the fact that the platform is blockchain based, it makes it easier to share data and to provide a full traceability. But it's not needed. I mean, all organizations for themselves, they can decide what they would like to share and with whom they would like to share that. I think also the advantage there is when the data is live, so it's up to date, it makes it easier to share information with roasters, social lenders, or service providers. You don't have to retype it, you don't have to send another emails, you know exactly where the contract is, who owns it, and where it is, where the coffee is. And I think Beko provides a track record, whether it's for individual producers, their organizations, the roasters, and the traders. Where the data, they provide more insight, better understanding of different parties in the coffee value chain, and therefore can lower the risk. Because if you're not knowing who you're dealing with, who's benefiting from the trade, what's the current value of an export contract that was guaranteed for your finance, it becomes more complicated. But if you have that information, have access to that information, that it makes it more viable that access to markets and access to finance will combine. And I think especially in the current COVID situation where we see, well, also what Richard just mentioned, I have never heard a producer organization that said, it was so well worth for me to visit the buyers. I think it still is. There are a lot of producer organizations that are visiting trade fairs. But especially now in this situation, that's not possible. So I don't have the feeling that online, everything for the past years as it has been, will just move to online trades. But I do believe that digital systems can support in finding new opportunities, providing insights, making coffee trades, and also in relation to credit flows more efficient.
Thank you, Isabel. So here is a bit of a balance between somehow making sure your data displays like your performance again, and building trust, basically. So the fact that we'll have, of course, like still some coffee trading done in a very traditional way, and then we'll have new relationship coming from these platforms where people will be able to understand if a party is reliable or not for making those trades, basically. So it's interesting somehow because, you know, for some of the attendees, there are definitely similarities between Beko and Algrano. So I think I would like to ask more or less the same question to Richard. And it's about really understanding what's your perspective on the future of online trading when we talk about coffee.
Yeah, well, Isabel gave a really nice answer, so I'm going to try not to cover exactly the same ground, because I think she said something really important, which I think is worth echoing, which is I don't think all coffee trade is suddenly going to go digital or move online. I don't think we as Algrano, for example, see ourselves suddenly hoovering up the market. We just see that there will be a percentage of the market that will probably move in that direction. And I think in part it won't move immediately because, so I should have said some of my background was maybe with the more traditional trading companies in the past. And you see when you're within those structures, or sometimes now still when I go to see some of the roasters as well, you know, buying teams are not very big, trading teams are not very big. And there's this weird kind of age gap with the very senior people tend to be in their 50s into their 60s. And then there's a big gap down, and then you get people in their 30s mostly. And the guys who are in the, and girls, ladies, anyone really who's kind of the very top end are in their 50s and 60s tend to be slightly, I have to say, anti-digitization. They're very used to old relationships. They call someone up, they say, I want 100 containers of X, and that person quotes them a price, and that's how they like to do it. In fact, someone like that actually told me not that long ago that if their young trading team used a platform like ours, that they would have failed. But I think that's quite funny because I think it's, I wouldn't say naive, but it's kind of not seeing where the market's going, which is right now there's an excess of coffee in the market, and it's pretty easy to pick and choose with whom you want to work. I mean, everybody needs to sell, and if you want it, you can get it. But in the next 3 or 4 years, if the S&D trends continue where they're going, that's not going to be the case. And then you're going to need to go out there and find new partners. And a lot of those people who are a bit older might have left. And I think the younger people who are used to using a digital forum for finding the car they want to buy next, the hotel they next want to visit, and the next book they want to buy are going to be pretty comfortable with saying, okay, I need to find a new supplier in Brazil or Nicaragua or Peru, and I can't spend 6 months doing an assessment of them or speaking to everybody about how were they in the last 5 years. I'd like to be able to assess it in 45 minutes because I've got to go and have a presentation to the board. And that is perfectly possible. That's the thing. It is possible to do it. It's just we haven't done it because traditionally we haven't been very comfortable with it. And I think, yeah, I'd much rather people spend a lot more time on the relationship and speaking to each other and being in touch more regularly than spending all that time trying to find out in the background whether the counterparty might or might not be trustworthy. So yeah, I kind of see it going that way. This age gap, I think, has held digitization back a little bit because we have quite traditional business, but I think it will slowly erode, and then we'll probably take a slightly jolting jump forward. And I think it can add a lot of value in certain sectors. I don't think it will immediately replace, you know, someone buying the equivalent of a grinder to go into decaf instant probably will not use a digital system because maybe the traceability or the transparency or the aggregation isn't there yet, although it could be. But I think, yeah, for your top line, whatever, if you want to do a whole bean fair trade product right now, it's the probably even easier way to do it than it is necessarily calling up a trader and then trying to ask them 17 times. So please can you remind me, which was the co-op you got it from? Oh, do I like that co-op? Oh, I'm not sure. Do we have enough pictures, by the way, for the back of the packet? I mean, all these things are something you can just close out in 30 seconds flat if you really want to. And I think that gives you more value potentially. And yeah, it just saves a lot of inefficiency in the chain, which doesn't need to exist. So I hope that's the direction it's going. I think I should really say, rather than necessarily, it's definitely going there. I certainly hope that's the direction it will go.
Thank you, Richard. Well, two connected and different answers at the same time, which is very interesting. So I guess we'll see in the next 5 to 10 years how things will develop and if the forecast was right, so to say. And then finally, Yorick, the future question for you as well. So in terms of selling coffee online for a roaster as you are, how do you see the future going there?
Well, obviously, I hope. I mean, there's a good future there, right? Let's see as well. But like, let's hope that people will buy more online. No, but without a joke, I think the decommoditization of coffee supply chains will continue to grow more rapidly, and digitalization in terms of Beko, Algrano, and others will support the decommoditization of coffee. We won't be drinking, I mean, looking at the home market here at least, we won't be drinking the same coffee we've been drinking until now, at least not at mass, because at the end of the day, we've been drinking the same coffee as my great-grandparents and my parents, and in the same packaging from the same supermarket shelf. That won't be necessary anymore because it will be easier to actually build direct trade relations. And on the other hand, consumers will be more demanding on where their product they consume comes from, how it's being produced, who produced it, etc. And I mean, we could be an extension at some point of, for example, a Beko platform, right? Where consumers can literally log into my Wakuli and see the contracts we've closed with Aldea or with others. I mean, that's the last part. I mean, we're at the end of the day sort of digitalizing the last piece here in the chain. And at the same time, we shouldn't overestimate how much consumers want to know, because that's the other problem. Working in the sector, and I think many people listening today are working in the coffee sector and similar sectors. We often think that consumers want to know everything. We want to know. We found in the past year and a half that consumers first and foremost want to know that it's okay, that they're fine, that they're on the good side of the medal, and that there are only few consumers who want to know more, but we should be able to offer that. And digitalization really makes it we can offer it. Even if only 5% of our consumers wants to really know if the contract was what we say it was. I mean, right now we're showing them a pie chart, right? Who earned what in the chain? I mean, we can back it up nowadays, and we should be able to. And on the other hand, there will be a future where producers will finally be able to ask us or the consumer directly about, and that's what I said before, who's drinking their coffee? What should we do to make our coffee more attractive in the future? How can we move together as a sector with consumption patterns? Because at the end of the day, we're following, I mean, we're educated, but we're also following a taste and flavors of average consumers or different types of consumers. And we will diversify there too, in different types of consumers wanting a different product, matching it to the offer of producers we work with, producer partners we work with, and not only in the top end, but also in, because in the end, I mean, 70 or 80% of all coffee produced, even on specialty level, will not be 86 plus. We will also offer those mid-range coffees for consumers to a price that they can afford, even if they can't live in the inner cities of the country we live in. So yeah, it will become easier to buy better coffee, and we can facilitate it as a chain. There will be more parties, and it will be less necessary to drink the same we've been always drinking. And yeah, ask and demand and have insight in something more traceable and transparent.
Thank you, Yorick. So I guess we'll have our final poll, and I hope we'll have a straight answer here from all the attendees. We'll see. Maybe not. So let's wait for a bit for the answer to come in. Even though, of course, efficiency is quite a word that can imply many different things. So okay. So we can end the poll now. So I guess, yeah, we have the majority definitely towards the yes, which is nice. I guess we covered that during the webinar. And before starting with the Q&A session, also, since we are very good on time, I think it would be nice to see if any of the speakers or would like to ask questions to their other speaker, and also have some internal discussion among themselves, just to, so anyone that is really excited to ask a question to the other panelists, please feel free to do so. We have some time that we can use.
Yeah, Elisa, I would love to ask a question.
Go ahead.
I mean, we think we're filling in a gap, right? But maybe that's not true at all. So I would really love to know from the others if they see any added value in what they're doing, if we have more data on our own consumers, on the end consumer of the products we're working with, or on coffee in this case. So yeah, if anyone maybe could share if Like they don't need that data at all, because at the end the roaster is the off taker here, right? Like the roaster is the off taker of Ivania, and the roaster is the off taker of Beko and Isabel, and the roaster is the off taker of Algrano. But I mean, there's a consumer at the end who really needs to consume a lot of coffee to keep growing. So yeah, curious.
I can say half an answer. I think the way that we would probably say it is it's about like making time use more efficient. I mean, we do a lot of platform work or whatever, publicity work and everything else. And you always want to balance between providing enough information that it provides value to a consumer through a roasting business, but also not asking for so much that it becomes a disincentive. I mean, you see that with quite a lot of producers. Ivania could probably say it's better than me, but they're very enthusiastic in the beginning and then quite disheartened when they've been asked for a huge amount and then very little comes back. And I think that's quite valuable, because I think also sometimes, maybe this is just me and I've not heard it from you, Yorick, but I have heard it from other roasters but you did just say it. I mean, not all consumers are that interested. And then we ask so much. And I think the other thing would maybe be about tweaking processing methods. I think there's a lot of exciting experimentation, particularly on the specialty side, but sometimes processing methods are really quite expensive, and there's then quite a lot of scattershot approach with a kind of like, right, we're just going to try a honey because we think honey would be a good idea to do. And then, it costs twice as much to process. Maybe you can't sell it. Maybe it doesn't improve the cut. Like those things are kind of feedback you could get quite quickly from the other end. I think would be worthwhile.
I don't know if Ivania, I felt like you wanted to comment on that as well, but maybe I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, there's no problem.
No. Yes, I wanted to add something more, and is related to, of course, we would like to provide like more information to the roasters, but the first thing that you have to get into is what kind of information is really useful for you as a roaster. Because sometimes, for example, I have some customers who ask me for, okay, just send me a presentation about this coffee. Other may ask me for a coffee profile. Other may ask for history. So it's when you don't have like one single way to go. For example, what would be like them, or maybe we can do a next webinar about what information can a producer provide to a roaster, or what information a roaster demands from producers. That is really important to promote the coffee. That is important to share with the consumers. That is important to do the marketing also for your roastery. So that's something that is still missing, because we may develop one software, you have another software there, but how we can connect that information and you can get access to that.
Thank you, Ivania. So I think we have space for one more question from you as panelists, if you want. Otherwise, we can move on to the Q&A session.
I think also related to the answer of Ivania, I think besides the fact that producer organizations understand what consumers would like to see, I think it's also important that the fact that you have information online, and maybe it's easier to check if you are a consumer or if you're a roaster, to share that type of information with the ultimate client, with the consumer. You don't need to update it all the time. You don't need to say, oh, check back a checklist. And I think that a lot of information, not only just requested by the consumer, but even if we check information that's requested by certification organs, if you could have that information already collected, you have it online, probably 90% of the questions, 95 maybe even, they are the same. So instead of asking all the time the same, if you have that information, you have it online, and you can easily share it, it will save you a lot of time in the future, because it's already there and it can be searched for.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Yorick. I think he did answer your question in a way, no? That's great. So
Yes.
we have many questions here, and I'm trying to select through them, and I think we'll go with the first one. That is somehow something that also came up during our internal discussion prior to the webinar, which is like from Robert, how important is traceability for buyers? Is it the same for Arabica and Robusta? And is it really so that coffee drinkers want to scan a barcode and want to know where the coffee came from? So this is more than one question, of course, but I think it's interesting to see this traceability aspect. We've been talking quite a lot about digital innovation and traceability as somehow one comes with the other, but we also know that traceability maybe is not the only value. So I guess this is a very open question for all of you. So I don't know, whoever wants to take it, you're more than welcome.
I think for us, it's important that a system like Beko, it can provide traceability, but it's an option. I mean, it's not the objective of the system. The it does it because it's based on blockchain. So it's easy to have things traceable. It's easy to share data. It's easy to share information, but it shouldn't be the objective of having a platform. I mean, you could also do that in another type of system. But I think that if, in our case, the objective of Beko is facilitating access to markets and combining that with access to finance, and yes, the fact that you can make things traceable, make things visible if you like, that's fine, that's nice. But yeah, I think that's important. It should do something for the farmers, should do something for the organization, but also for the buyers.
Thank you, Isabel. And then I have another interesting question here, and I think this could be for Yorick. I'm just putting you on the spot here, which is basically Spencer is asking, so I'm interested in how or what kind of value could flow back from the consumers, so coffee drinkers like your buyers in this case, and how digitalization could redistribute this value back to the farmers. So maybe here it's more like understanding what consumers actually can offer as a value back to the producers.
Well, I would say consumers are simply the extension of a roaster in that sense, right? If you look at it from a producer, or if you could look from a producer perspective historically, I mean, a producer is telling often, or a roaster is often telling a producer what they're looking for, or they're trying to match and align what their consumer needs. The only next step that we can offer is that we actually exactly know who the consumer is. And that is often more difficult for non-digital brands or for non-digital companies, because the feedback loop isn't that that direct, and also because sometimes there's no feedback whatsoever. So it's more of a guess, and then you see yourself growing in the market, so probably do something well, or you see yourself declining in the market and you don't do that well, and you maybe need to find or another coffee or another brand name or whatever. I mean, we have the possibility to actually use the access we have to consumers to feed producers. But again, it shouldn't just be about us having 1,000 comments from 1,000 consumers. I mean, we have over 500 consumers going online every day. So obviously there's no producer, and Ivania, tell me if I'm wrong and I will send you everything. But there's no producer who wants to have a list of 20 pages a day with comments from consumers thinking something of their coffee. But that aggregated data just does say something about what a consumer needs. And it might be something else than just adapting processing, because indeed Richard was right, it can be very expensive and maybe it's not even the right choice. It could also simply be a lack of the right data that is being supplied, which Ivania said as well. What does a roaster need, and does every roaster need the same? Well, I don't know if every roaster needs the same, but I can tell you at some point what the average Dutch consumer needs, maybe in the north of the Netherlands or the east of Germany, or in general in Western Europe. And I think there we've got an added value. Besides, obviously, the classic values that I think everyone likes to be appreciated. I mean, I like it when people tell me that they like Wakuli's coffee. I also like it when a producer tells me that they like to work with me because we work well together. I can imagine that a producer likes to hear from someone who drinks their coffee that they like their coffee, besides just the snobbish roaster who's also a Q grader, right? By the way, I'm not a Q grader, I'm just snobby. But I think that's at the end of the day the added value we can offer. And then we only need to find out how to best match it. And we're just in the beginning there. So I'm really inviting producers also to tell us what they need from us, but also from our consumers. I don't know if I answered the question, but
I think so. I don't know. I guess that is a question for the attendees, but I believe so. Thank you so much, Yorick. So I guess this is probably more for Ivania. I don't know. This is just my my own pick, but this is something we hear many times when we talk about digitalization, and in some sort of level, it's really true, and it's difficult also to better understand and tackle this issue. But I think you are probably the best person to answer this. So here's the question: how you ensure digitalization doesn't leave out those less able to get into that, like thinking about small co-ops, human farmers, and cooperatives that don't have internet access? Do you want me to say that again? I know I was very fast.
The last seconds I didn't hear because I had a connection.
Sure. So how do you ensure digitalization doesn't leave out those people less able to get into that? And for example, small cooperatives, for example, female farmers, and then cooperatives that don't have internet access.
Well, I think most of the producers organizations attend people in the rural area, and not all the people in rural area have access to internet. However, this may be like a huge issue like 10, 20 years ago. But now I think at least 50% of the rural area have access to internet. And the way because we also have communities where we have a lot of members and they cannot access to that. But the way we do it is, I'm not sure if you're listening or I lost connection.
No, it was breaking, but now we can hear you again. So feel free to continue.
Okay. No, okay, we are back. So the way we have doing is, okay, we have the online system, but also we did or developed offline apps. For example, we will have receiving stations in different rural communities. Some of these communities don't have access to internet. So how they are going to use the software? So we developed an application that works offline for them, and the information gets there. Once they are able to go to another community that have internet, they connect again and upload the information to the system. So it's feasible to work and attend, because as I said before, we only work with the rural area, and we know many of these communities don't have access to internet. So that's the reason we have to develop the right application, the right software for these specific areas also. And if a producer, for example, I know there's many people asking about the education and how many school years a producer have. In our case, for example, most of the producers that we attend, they only have 3 years of school. Some of them don't even know how to read. But many of them can easily use, for example, a WhatsApp or Facebook or YouTube. And how can you use all of these different tools to reach this producer? One example we did last year is, if there is a farmer who is doing a good practice in the farm, can you please do a video about a good practice? And we are going to share this video in the different digital platform that we have with the rest of the members, so the rest of the members can learn from you. So it's something that you have to be creative, how to reach this video, but you can do it.
Thank you, Vania. There were many questions like this one, so I hope we responded to more than one. Then there's a question for Richard, and let's see, because I think we answered quite a lot already. So how do you see the origin to destination market travels and visits evolving both physically and digitally? I think this is interesting also for you as Algrano and yourself as traders in the past?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a big question. My hope is that actually there might be slightly less travel, ironically, and slightly more contact. I think a lot of travel in the past has been a bit of a trophy, if that makes sense. Like my micro roastery, we've been to Costa Rica or we've been to Guatemala for 2 weeks, and we would like to tell you all about how we went to Guatemala. And I'm not sure it was always that impactful. And I think maybe what can be more useful is actually having more regular contact with the producers themselves through all these new and wonderful digital means to do it. So like, I have quite a few roasters who work through us who, I mean, we just have open connection channels. So they will call each other once a month on WhatsApp or something just because they've worked together for the last 2 or 3 years and find out how the harvest's doing. And some of them swap information about their kids' birthdays. I don't know. I mean, but there is a lot more to a relationship than just speaking once a year around the time you want a contract, or visiting once a year when you're happy to go and spend 2 days on a farm. And I think my hope is that maybe travel will happen a little bit less often, but when it does happen, it's a bit more meaningful, and that communication will be a little bit more frequent. But I mean, I'm kind of interested to hear Ivania ask the same question, because it's kind of like pose it to her and say, like, how would Aldea Global as a producer organization like it to evolve? Ivania, do you mind answering my question to you?
I lost you for a few minutes. I guess like 1 minute. So I didn't get your last.
I was saying, so I'd said that my feeling is that, or my hope is that there'll be slightly fewer physical visits and slightly more regular communication via things like WhatsApp and video calls and Skype. And that when visits take place, they will be slightly more meaningful. So maybe a bit longer, a bit more involved around cupping and quality. But maybe then they'll happen, I don't know, every 2 years or 3 years instead of have it happening every year, because that's the way that people have met each other. But I wanted to ask you, as a producers organization, how do you see it?
Well, I think we had a huge challenge this year because of COVID. And as you were telling at the beginning, we used to do like a lot of travels in the past. We used to do, for example, attending different conferences, different shows, coffee shows, visiting our buyers. We received visits in our association. And this year, everything was canceled. And if we see this example, and coffee has not stopped moving. Coffee keeps going on. And that means, yes, it's important, but I think we can use more technology for improving in that. I think it's possible. Now it's so easy to connect. For example, if you want to connect with a farmer, let's do a WhatsApp video call. If you want to connect with one of the meetings that we are having there, it's, you know, this was like the correct year for making a good use for all the different platforms that were already created, but that we were not using because we were doing it on the traditional way. But this is, yeah, of course, it's possible for using it.
Oh, thank you for answering my question.
Thank you. So thank you. I think we had a great webinar. Thank you so much for all the attendees for staying with us for so long. I know that almost 1 hour and a half is quite a long time to attend a virtual webinar. I mean, of course, the webinar is virtual, but you know what I mean. The engagement is completely different. I would say that I also want to thank, quite unexpectedly, as you know, we have an amazing Justy Arman behind the scene here that is answering a few questions, just typing, and Justy is from the Coffee Podcast, one of our media partners. And also the behind the scene of Sara Morocchi, always from Luna Origin Consulting, always very prompt and helping the discussion. So again, thank you to everyone. Feel free to keep following us and do join us for the third webinar about implementation. There will be there the chance to really talk about how this technology has been built and in a way try to better understand what's the value of data again there, data collection, data management. And I think even though we answered this quite a lot now during the first webinar and the second webinar, there's still so much to talk about. We'll talk a bit more about scalability and try to bring different examples and also a matter that I really think it's interesting, which is price. Try a bit to understand there how price plays a role when we talk about coffee digitalization. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoy. Thank you to the speakers and have a great evening or the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa.